Thank you, Femke. Before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm giving this talk from the unceded lands of the Wiradjuri people, Orange Dirt people land. So I pay respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. I've got a little talk here that I just very quickly go into. I'm not sure how long it goes, but hopefully not too long. But thank you everyone for turning up and being a participant. As a young boy, trauma, a lack of skills, mental health issues, including addiction, were the main players in my time as a homeless person. This began when my mum gave me and my sisters to an orphanage. And after that, I spent a lot of time in juvenile detention centres. When I was 17, the state psychiatrist at one of the detention centres diagnosed me as a sociopath. And in fact, I spent roughly 60% of my youth locked up in one fashion or another until I was 19, when I was ejected from the boys' homes and the punitive institutions for the last time. After I left the institutions, I suffered from a complete lack of connection to society. I felt like a misfit and I couldn't find a job or a place to live. For many years, I'd been told that I was dumb and that I wouldn't amount to anything. And that's exactly how I felt after I left the institutions, dumb and a misfit. And this brought a whole lot of shame and stigma into my life. I was too afraid to ask for help, lest I be thought of as dumb and stupid and not being able to look after myself. And I really didn't have the skills to establish a place in a community. Places like Fred's Place really didn't exist back then, and couch surfing wasn't something that was in fashion either. There were homeless hostels like the Matthew Talbot and other places, usually run by Vinnie's and Vincent de Paul. But as I got older, I became more and more disconnected, and social isolation, loneliness contributed to massive anxiety issues. And they fueled that shame and that self-loathing that fed a growing and unstoppable anger that lived inside of me. And as a result, I became a very, very angry and dangerous person. I was also using drugs and alcohol to self-medicate, to kill the pain of that trauma and to try and control that anxiety. After I bounced around society for quite some time, just getting into trouble with the police, into trouble with the authorities, I had no idea of how sick I really was. And then, quite unexpectedly, when I was about 35, I found a place where I felt like I fitted in. And it happened in a moment when I was crouching on a wet forest, leech-covered floor. It was on a mountaintop in a rainforest, not far from Pete's place, actually, from Fred's place. And night was falling, and so was heavy rain, as it tends to do in a rainforest. But I'd never felt so safe in all my life. Then I realised the reason I felt so secure was because there was no one else around. So I decided I'd stay up in that forest for a while. I became a forest-dwelling hermit. Some might think that this is a romantic notion and everything would be okay from then on. But the truth is that I was just too sick to live with other people and to self-isolate, there's a term, was just the most comfortable way for me to survive. I continued to use drugs and alcohol while I was in the forest, but after a while living in there, I'd learned how to make my own grog and grow my own dope, and this gave me an endless supply of painkiller, and this just made me sicker and sicker. I was really traumatised, lost and lonely. And with every passing year, I grew sicker, physically and mentally, until finally I met some aliens. And basically psychosis had pretty much taken over. You know, one night I was enjoying my campfire and two very tall, thin, hairless, gothic white aliens appeared. Using a simple logic, they argued that if I died in the forest, my body may never be found, and this would cause deep pain to my family. With this logic, they convinced me to give society one more chance. So I left the forest. I'd been up there about 10 years, and when I left, I'd withered away to just about 41.5 kilos of skin and bone, about half the size of what I am today. I'd lost most of my teeth, much of my mind, and almost my life up there. I was hospitalised and slowly recovered. When I was released, I found myself back doing the exact same things that I'd been doing before I went into the forest. And I was still homeless, I was still traumatised, and I was still alone. The only difference? I was 45 years old, a bit long in the tooth to be starting out in life. I'd realised with some self-reflection, just a little bit, that I was creating many of my life problems because I had not learned how to live as a young person and how to be a part of a community or even to take care of myself properly. And I realised something had to change. Me. First, I had to get myself well. And it was abundantly clear that drugs and alcohol were doing me untold harm. They had to go. So I quit them cold turkey, a year-long odyssey in itself that ultimately delivered me to a healthier and clear-headed space. Giving up the alcohol and the drugs was only the beginning, and I needed to continue to work on them for many years. I also needed to learn new skills to live. Learning to care about myself was challenging, very, very challenging, and sometimes it seemed almost too hard, especially when I was living rough on the edges of the city. Trying to stay clean and sober, trying to keep my body clean, my hair clean, learning new habits like cleaning my teeth each morning and evening, trying to dress well. You know, I was still angry, and sometimes it was hard to have a conversation without swearing. Not that I swore a lot, but I wanted to be a better person and stop swearing. That was important to me. A big one for me was learning to have a good diet, to eat properly. That was always challenging. You know, there were a lot of challenges, and I had to work on it if I wanted to change the person I was. And these few that I've mentioned were just the beginning. I also wanted to be self-supporting. This was a big part of taking care of myself. Learning how to earn my own income, to look after myself. So I decided I needed a job. But for some strange reason, employers weren't looking for a middle-aged sociopath with bad beer brewing skills and all the sartorial elegance of Charles Manson. That's what they used to call me up on the Gold Coast in the soup kitchens. Every single application I made was rejected or ignored. I realised the reason I wasn't getting work was that I had no qualifications. You know, I had a primary school level grasp of reading, writing and maths. But if I was going to survive in this new jungle, I had to get an education. As we know, soup kitchens are a great source of information, and I learned there that there had been an explosion in personal computers during my decade-long hiatus into the wilderness. I found a 6-week Cert 1 course in computers and threw myself into it. The course taught me 2 things. 1, I wasn't that keen on computers, but 2, I love to learn. Next, I set myself on getting the Year 10 certificate. I asked around the TAFEs and community colleges to see if they offered the school certificate. They didn't, but I was told about a bridging course. If I did well enough, it could open the door to attend university. Now, a formal education is not for everyone, but the idea did appeal to me, mainly because of my past and people telling me how dumb I was. I wanted to prove them wrong. I was accepted into the course and I threw myself into it. I had no idea what I was doing, but at least I was doing something. And at the time, that's what mattered, doing something. Study gave me a purpose and something to do during the day. I was still a rough sleeper, but at least I was a busy rough sleeper. My dedication to study, usually at my new makeshift home in the sand dunes of South Surface Paradise, and I did get down as far as Tweed Heads. I fed the mosquitoes at the back of the Tweed Heads mangroves there. But that paid off. In November 2003, I graduated. I was 48 years old, and this was the very first meaningful achievement of my life. And I'd earned enough marks to enrol in university. My first day at university, I felt intimidated, but also very proud that I'd made it. Still, I remained homeless until halfway through my degree in 2005. On completion of my degree, I received a phone call from a lecturer who offered me marking and tutoring. I got a job and I didn't even apply for it. The irony of that really does ring in my head sometimes. But I still felt dumb and inadequate right up until I was conferred with a PhD in early 2016. In Australia, it's estimated that approximately 1.2% of the population has a PhD. As a homeless person, I was a part of the 0.48% of the population, or amongst the estimated 116,000 homeless people sleeping rough each night. And this showed I was truly coming up in the world of percentages. Along the way, I'd not only learned how to read and write properly, I'd learned how to let people into my life, into my heart. I forged strong connections with some wonderful peers at university. They became beautiful friends who encouraged me and forced me to see myself as I truly was. Not as a hermit, not as a homeless man, not as a sociopath. To them, I was just a man, their friend, a person like anyone else, doing the best they could. Sure, I'd had a rough try, but I wasn't the only one. The thesis for my doctorate meticulously researched and gave voice to members of what the Australian Senate in 2004 called the Forgotten Australians. An estimated 500,000 people, like me, who had suffered abuses in out-of-home care institutions during the 20th century. I got my first tenured position as a university lecturer at the age of 64. Took a while, but I can tell you it feels pretty good. One of the most difficult things I had to do was make a call to Centrelink and tell them I didn't want the pension anymore. I didn't need it because after all that time, I could support myself. Some years ago, I finally managed to buy a place of my own. It's not much, just a 2-bedroom steel shed on a modest concrete slab. But it's a nice plot of land surrounded on all sides by forest. And there's a familiarity about that. But today I have a home. And it's a home that I love and I care about. I have 2 stepsons and a very talented, beautiful, kind lady. And she cares about me. In 2019, I was asked to be consultant for the New South Wales Premier's priority to make a 25% reduction in rough sleeping by 2025, and with a zero target in mind by 2030. Today, I'm contracted to highlight the voice of the vulnerable people sleeping rough by providing a qualitative evaluation of that Premier's priority project on housing people in the program. One of the pilot areas for this is the Tweed Heads. The other one is Newcastle. They're out there tonight. Homeless people, plenty of them. Not too far from where you are and not too far from where I am down here. And I have a really good idea of how they feel. If you would like to help, supporting services like Fred's Place is a way to begin. Another is that if you would like a signed copy of my book, you can email me at drgregorypsmith@gmail.com. For $45, I will post and send you a signed copy, and I will donate 10% of every book sold to Fred's Place. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Professor Gregory Smith. Thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your journey, and really showing all of the hardship and challenges that you had to overcome. And it's not for everyone that, you know, they have the ability, and we're very lucky that we have Fred's Place to support many people in tough situations, and we're very, very blessed that you are such a vocal advocate for so many people that are in vulnerable positions. So thank you for taking the time tonight to be here with us. Truly, truly appreciate it.
Thank you. If there's any questions, I'm okay with some questions.